Listen carefully, because what you're about to see in this video is not random and it's not imagination. These are 3 situations that look completely normal at first, until something happens right in front of you that doesn't make sense, but you can see it clearly. No shadows, no guesses, just real moments where something changes. And once you notice it, it's already too late to react. If you ever find yourself in one of these situations, don't wait to understand it, just leave.
Story 1. My name is Ryan, and the first thing I noticed was that the man in the lobby was already looking at me before I even opened the building door all the way. I live in a small apartment building on a quiet street, and when it snows hard, the whole block goes still. Fewer cars, fewer people, less noise. And that night, the snow was coming down thick enough to blur the other side of the road. I got home a little after 11, carrying a grocery bag in one hand and my keys in the other. And before I stepped inside, I saw him through the glass, standing near the mailboxes, facing the entrance, not leaning, not checking anything, not using his phone. Just standing there with his eyes fixed straight ahead. And what made me slow down was how still he was. Because most people waiting in a lobby do something without thinking. They shift, look at the floor, glance at the elevator, rub their hands if it is cold. But he was doing none of that. He looked like he had picked a position and stopped completely. I pushed the door open and stepped in, and the first sound was the door closing behind me. And after that, there was nothing. No hello, no movement, no elevator noise. Just the heating system humming somewhere overhead and him looking directly at me. I gave a quick nod out of habit and said evening, and he did not answer. His face stayed the same. And I remember noticing something small right then that stayed with me. Because while I was looking at him, and while he was looking back, he did not blink once. Not a single time. I looked away first, because standing there, staring at another man in the lobby felt stupid. So I walked toward the elevator, trying to act normal, and I could feel him tracking me as I moved. Not the way people casually follow motion with their eyes, but exactly, like he was keeping me centered the whole time. And when I pressed the button for the elevator, I caught his reflection in the brushed metal doors, and he was still turned toward me, with the same expression, same posture, same open eyes. And I stayed there longer than I should have, because the elevator was slow that night. And in that wait, I checked the reflection 3 different times, and every time it was the same. No change in his stance, no glance away, no blink. And that was when it stopped feeling like awkward eye contact and started feeling wrong, because there is a point where staring stops looking human and starts looking deliberate. And that was exactly what it felt like he was doing it on purpose for longer than a person normally could. The elevator finally arrived and the doors opened, and I stepped inside quickly, then turned around as the doors started to close, and the space by the mailboxes was empty, completely empty. And the change was so sudden that I stepped forward again instinctively and hit the button to hold the doors, because there was nowhere for him to go in that amount of time. The stairwell door was to the left and heavy enough that I would have heard it open. The front door was behind me, and I would have seen it. And there are no corners in that lobby deep enough to hide a man standing full height. But he was gone. And before I could decide whether to get out and check, I heard fast footsteps from the lobby coming directly toward the elevator, not running, but too quick and too close. And a hand hit the edge of the doors before they closed, forcing them back open, and it was him, standing right there, same face, same stillness, same eyes wide open under the elevator light. and he stepped in without saying, "Excuse me," or looking at the panel at first. Just entered and turned until he was standing beside me. Then, after a second, he reached out and pressed the floor above mine, one floor higher, and pulled his hand back down to his side. And the whole time, I was looking at the side of his face because it was impossible not to, and I still did not see a blink. Not even when the light hit him directly. Not even when the doors shut. And inside the elevator, it was worse, because there was nowhere else to look and no space to ignore him. The mirror on the back wall showed both of us, and in that reflection, I could see his eyes were not on the numbers above the door and not on his own reflection. They were on me, fixed on my face, and I kept my own eyes forward because I did not want him to think I was reacting. But every few seconds, I checked the mirror, and every time he was already looking there, already waiting, and I started counting in my head, without meaning to, just to see how long it would go on. Because maybe I had missed it in the lobby. Maybe I had been nervous and made it into something bigger than it was. But I counted all the way through one floor and then halfway to the next, and still nothing. And that was when I understood that if he was blinking at all, he was doing it so rarely that I had not seen it once since stepping into the building. The elevator stopped on my floor, and the doors opened, and I got out immediately. And when I stepped into the hallway, I looked back once, and he was still inside, still facing me, still not blinking, and the doors closed between us. I walked fast, but not running down the hall to my apartment, unlocked the door, went in, locked it, then locked the deadbolt too, and I stood there in the entryway listening, because that is what you do when something feels off. You stop, and you listen to see if you are overreacting. And for a few seconds there was nothing, so I set my groceries down on the kitchen counter and tried to shake it off. I even told myself it was probably some guy staying with someone in the building, maybe drunk, maybe strange, maybe just one of those people with an intense stare. And I had almost convinced myself when I heard 3 knocks on my front door, slow and evenly spaced, not loud, not angry, just controlled. I froze immediately and looked at the door from across the room, and after a few seconds, there were 3 more knocks, same rhythm, and I stayed quiet. Then the handle turned slightly, just enough to show pressure on the other side, and stopped when the lock held. Then, nothing again, and I backed away 1 step at a time, without making a sound, keeping my eyes on the door. And after maybe 20 seconds, I heard a different sound, not from the handle, from lower down, like a finger dragging once across the wood, and then silence, complete silence. I stood there long enough for my legs to start hurting, and when nothing else happened, I moved slowly into the living room and checked the peephole from the side, not standing directly in front of it. And the hallway was empty. No one at my door, no one near the elevator, nothing. And I should have left it there. But once something like that happens, your brain wants to prove to itself that there is an explanation. So I called my neighbor from 2 doors down, an older guy named Mark, who was still awake most nights. And I asked if he could open his door for a second and look into the hall. And when he did, I cracked mine and stepped out, and the hallway was empty. But the elevator at the far end was still on my floor, with the doors closed, which was odd, because usually it moves back down after a minute, if no one calls it. So Mark asked what was going on, and I said there was some guy in the building being weird. And before I could say more, the elevator doors opened at the end of the hall, and the man was still inside, standing in the exact same place, facing straight out into the hall toward my apartment. And even from that distance, I could see his face clearly enough to know he was staring at me again. Mark saw him too and called out, "Can I help you?" And the man did not react, did not step out, did not answer, just stood there with those eyes fixed ahead. And then the doors closed on him by themselves. And neither of us moved for a second. Then Mark said, "Stay here," and started walking toward the elevator. And I followed a few steps behind because I did not want him going alone, even though I was already regretting it. He pressed the button and the elevator came back up at once. But when the doors opened, it was empty, no one inside. And Mark swore under his breath and looked at the stairs, then at me. Then pressed the button for the floor above mine and sent the elevator up while we both watched the number panel. It moved one floor, stopped, then started down again, and when it returned, the car was still empty. And that should have made it easier, but it did not. Because now, it was not just me. Mark had seen him too, and there was still no sign of where he had gone. Mark checked the stairwell and found nothing, then told me to stay in my apartment and call building management in the morning, and I did exactly that. The manager checked the entry log for the front door and told me only my key fob had been used around that time. No one else had entered through the main entrance for over half an hour before I arrived, and when I asked about cameras, he said the lobby camera had frozen during the storm and only captured one still frame every few minutes. Then he emailed me the one image from just before I entered because he thought it might help identify the man. And in that image, the lobby was empty, completely empty. The mailboxes, the elevator, the floor mat, all visible, no one standing there at all. But I know what I saw because I did not imagine the silence. I did not imagine the hand stopping the elevator. And Mark did not imagine that face staring out of the elevator at the end of the hall. I still live in the same building, and the elevator still works the same way. And sometimes when the doors open and there is someone already inside, I wait for the next one, because I learned something that night. If someone has been watching too long before you even notice them, you should not stay long enough to find out where they were really trying to go. Story 2. My name is Lucas, and the first thing that made no sense was that the lights were already on inside the storage shelter, even though it was supposed to be locked after closing. This was not a building like the lodge or the housing block. It was a small maintenance structure halfway down the mountain, near a secondary slope, used to store tools, fuel containers, and emergency equipment. No guests were allowed there, and staff only accessed it during the day. I had been sent down to check a reported issue with one of the lower signal lights near the trail, and the fastest way back was cutting across that section. When I got closer, I saw the shelter clearly. A rectangular metal structure, half surrounded by snow, a single door facing the slope, one small window on the side, and the interior light fully on. Bright enough to be visible from several meters away, I slowed down immediately, because that light should not have been on, not at that hour, not with no staff scheduled there. I stopped about 5 meters away and looked directly at the window. The glass was slightly fogged from the inside, but still clear enough to see shapes, shelves along the wall, tools hanging, a bench near the back. And right in the center of the room, there was a chair, a simple metal chair that should have been against the wall like everything else, but it was not. It was placed facing the door, perfectly centered, and on that chair there was a jacket, thick, dark, fully zipped, positioned upright, not collapsed, not hanging loosely, but filled out like it was being worn by someone sitting perfectly still. I did not move for several seconds, just stood there, watching through the glass. The jacket did not shift, did not fall, did not react to anything. It remained in that exact position, as if a person was inside it. I stepped closer slowly, until I was directly in front of the door, and I noticed there were no footprints leading to it. The snow around the shelter was smooth, except for my own. No tracks from the slope, no tracks from the back, nothing. I reached for the handle and pushed. It did not open, locked, as expected. I pulled out my radio and said the light was on and something was inside. But before I finished speaking, the radio cut into static for a second, and then silence. No response. I looked back through the window again, and the chair was still there, the jacket still upright, and then it moved, not falling, not slipping, but turning slightly to the left, slowly, clearly, like something inside it had just rotated its upper body to face the window directly. I saw it happen completely. No flicker, no interruption, just a steady, controlled movement. The sleeves shifted with it. The shoulders adjusted, and the front of the jacket now pointed directly at me. I stepped back immediately and tried the handle again harder, still locked. I looked at the keypad next to the door and pressed the code we use for maintenance access. The screen lit up but did not accept input. Every button press registered, but nothing changed. No unlock sound, no error. Just unresponsive. I hit it again, same result. And when I looked back inside, the chair was no longer in the same position. It had moved closer to the door, not dragged across the floor with marks. Not tilted, but repositioned, now less than a meter from the entrance. Still facing directly toward me. Still upright. Still filled out, as if occupied. I could see the lower part, clearly, now. The sleeves hanging slightly forward, the shape of arms implied inside them. I stepped back further into the snow and looked around the shelter again. Still no footprints anywhere except mine. No one approaching. No one leaving, just the light inside, and that chair, closer than before. I went back to the keypad and pressed it repeatedly. Faster now. Harder. Nothing changed. And behind me, the wind picked up slightly across the slope. But the shelter itself stayed silent. No sound from inside. No movement, except what I could see. I forced myself to look again through the window, and this time the jacket was even closer, the chair almost touching the door, and the sleeves were no longer hanging straight down. They were angled slightly outward. Like arms preparing to push or reach, I stopped moving completely. Just stood there watching it. And then the door handle moved. Not fully turning, but pressing down halfway from the inside. Slow. Controlled, stopping just before the latch released. I grabbed the handle from outside at the same moment and held it in place. I could feel pressure against it from the other side. Not sudden, not violent. Just steady force. Something pushing down against the handle at the same time I was holding it. I did not let go. I leaned back, using my weight to keep it from opening, and for several seconds, nothing changed. The pressure stayed constant. Then it increased slightly, enough that I had to adjust my grip and press harder, my boots sliding a little in the snow. I looked through the window again, while holding the handle, and the jacket was no longer sitting. It was standing now, fully upright, behind the door, shoulders level, sleeves lifted slightly forward. Positioned exactly where a person would stand before opening a door, and it stayed like that, not shaking, not shifting, just there, clearly visible, clearly occupying space. I could see the outline of the torso filling the jacket completely. I could see the sleeves angled toward the handle, and the pressure on the door increased again, more force this time. Enough that the latch clicked slightly, but did not release, because I was still holding it from outside. I stepped back, suddenly letting go of the handle, and the door moved forward a few centimeters before stopping again. Not opening fully, just that small gap, and through that gap I could see inside directly, the jacket standing there less than half a meter away, no face, no head visible above the collar, just the filled shape of a body inside it, and the sleeves raised slightly, as if reaching toward the opening. I stepped back immediately, turning away from the door and moving fast across the snow toward the main trail. Not running blindly, but moving as quickly as I could without falling. I looked back once, and the door was now slightly open, wider than before, and the chair was no longer visible behind it, only the interior light and empty space where it had been. I reached the marked trail within seconds, and stayed there until I saw 2 other staff members coming down from above. I signaled them, and pointed back toward the shelter, explaining fast what I had seen. And when we all returned together, the door was closed again, the light still on, the window clear, and inside there was no chair in the center, no jacket, nothing out of place, everything back against the walls like normal, and the snow around the shelter was still completely untouched except for my own tracks. No new marks, no signs of anyone leaving. And since that night, I do not go near that structure alone, because I saw it clearly, not something hidden, not something imagined, something standing inside a locked room, moving toward the door, and trying to open it from the other side. Story 3. My name is Mason, and the first thing that went wrong was how fast they approached us. 2 girls walking straight toward us, across an almost empty part of the mountain, like they already knew who we were. It was late in the day, snow still falling lightly, visibility clear enough to see the lifts in the distance, but the area around us had thinned out a lot. Fewer people, fewer voices, just the sound of skis cutting through snow and the wind moving across the slope. We had just come off a lift and were standing near the top, deciding our last run when they stopped right in front of us. 1 brunette, 1 blonde, both calm, both smiling, both already talking before anyone answered, asking what runs we had done, asking if we wanted something better, something not crowded. Derek answered first, like always. Nolan stepped closer. Chris laughed at something they said, and I stayed half a step back watching, because they did not hesitate at all. No pause, no small talk. Just straight into leading the conversation. The brunette pointed off to the side of the main trail and said there was a run through the trees that dropped faster and led straight to the lower lifts. She said almost no one used it because it was not marked clearly. Then the blonde pulled a small bottle from her jacket and held it out without asking. Derek took it, drank, handed it to Nolan, then to Chris. None of them hesitated. None of them asked what it was, and when it came to me, I raised it, but did not drink, just tilted it and handed it back. And I watched both girls closely as they took it back and put it away without drinking themselves. Then they turned and started moving without checking if we agreed, just expecting us to follow, and we did. Because Derek was already moving, Nolan right behind him, Chris laughing again, and I stayed just behind them. The path they took was not a trail, just a packed line of snow leading away from the main slope toward a group of trees. No sign, no markers, no poles, nothing official. And after maybe 20 seconds, we were already out of view of the main run. The noise dropped immediately. No lift overhead, no voices, just wind, and the sound of our boots pressing into snow. And, they made us take our skis off and walk slightly uphill for a short stretch, which made no sense, because every real run starts downhill from a lift, not uphill through unmarked snow. But Derek kept going. Nolan kept going. Chris did not question it, and we followed them into the trees until the ground leveled out and opened slightly. The brunette pointed downhill through a narrow gap and said that was the run. And there was nothing there except a slope through trees. No signs, no tracks, no indication that anyone had used it recently. Derek clipped in first, Nolan next, Chris adjusting his boots. And that was when Derek stopped talking mid-sentence and dropped onto one knee, not slipping, not losing balance, just stopping, like his body shut off. Nolan laughed for a second and told him to get up. Then Nolan himself slowed down, took 1 step back, and sat hard into the snow without catching himself. Chris said something like, "What the hell?" and reached for Derek. Then his own legs gave out, and he dropped onto his side, 3 of them down within seconds, not reacting normally, not trying to stand properly, just heavy, slow, uncoordinated. I stepped back immediately and looked at the girls, and both of them were standing still, watching. No surprise, no confusion, just watching. The brunette's face completely flat now. the blonde looking past us into the trees, and I said, "What did you give them?" And neither of them answered. Derek was trying to push himself up and failing. Nolan was on his back, blinking slowly. Chris was rolling onto his side, trying to sit up and couldn't. And I felt it then, a delay in my own movement. Not full loss of control, but slower than normal, like my body was reacting half a second late. I crouched down and grabbed snow with both hands and pressed it against my face hard, then again, forcing myself to stay alert. And when I looked back up, I saw it clearly. Beyond the trees where the ground opened into a narrow service road, there was a dark van parked facing away from us, engine running. No markings, no lights, except the front glow reflecting off the snow. The side door slid open and two men stepped out, both larger than any of us, heavy jackets, gloves, moving directly toward us without hesitation. And the moment they stepped forward, the girls moved aside slightly, clearing the path for them, not stepping back, not surprised, just shifting position like they had done this before. I stood up and took one step back, then another, and one of the men looked directly at me and changed direction toward me, faster than the others. And that was the moment where there was nothing left to figure out. No confusion, no guessing, just a clear choice to move or stay. I turned and went downhill through the trees as fast as I could without clipping in, carrying my skis badly, hitting branches, losing balance once and catching myself with one hand. Hearing movement behind me for a few seconds, then nothing. I pushed toward the open slope I had seen earlier and broke out of the trees onto a real trail where two distant skiers were visible far down the run. And I stopped there just long enough to look back. The tree line was still, no one stepping out, no van visible from that angle, just snow and wind. And I pulled my phone out with both hands and called ski patrol immediately, speaking fast, giving the only details I had: off trail, 3 people down, possible drugging, near an unmarked area. And they told me to stay where I was and not go back alone. I paced in place, watching the tree line, until 2 patrol workers arrived on a snowmobile and skis within minutes, and I took them back the same way I came, following broken branches and disturbed snow. And when we reached the clearing, the van was gone, the girls were gone, the men were gone, but Derek, Nolan, and Chris were still there. Moved slightly downhill from where they fell, all 3 breathing, all 3 barely responsive, their skis and poles missing, 1 glove missing from Derek, Nolan trying to sit up and failing again, Chris barely able to speak. Patrol radioed for backup, and more people arrived quickly. They checked vitals, stabilized them, and got them onto sleds. And I stood there watching the road where the van had been, now just empty snow with faint tire marks already filling in. By the time we were taken down the mountain, the tracks were almost gone. Security asked questions, police asked questions. We described the girls, described the men, described the van, but there was no trail name, no official access point, nothing marked on the map that matched where we had gone, just an unmarked entry point into trees that led to a service road. And over the next hours and days, there was no update that mattered, no one identified, no one found. And the only thing we knew for sure was how simple it had been, how fast it had happened, how normal it looked, right up until the moment it wasn't. And since that day, I don't follow anyone off a marked path. I don't take anything from someone I just met. And if someone walks straight up to me on an empty part of a mountain like they already know me, I don't stay there long enough to find out why. If there's one thing you should take from this, it's that nothing here needed imagination. Everything was right there in front of them, visible, clear, and already too close. Which story felt the most real to you? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to Tales of the Darkness and turn on notifications, because next time, you might recognize it. just a second too late.